Look, I don't know why you just can't make this work in the first place when I get here. Do I have to do all the work myself? Blast. Alright. You know how hard it is to do with all the dampening runes you've got upon me, don't you? Alright. And... There. There. Yes. Greetings. I am Lord Cadrian de Flynn, and I am a wizard. Greetings, one and all. I am Lord Cadrian de Flynn, diviner and inmate here at Wizard Jail. Once again serving out my sentence by answering the questions of you, the audience, both mages and the non-magical, to better the relations between the mundane and the magical, and to pay my pittance of a debt to society, one question at a time. Apparently those who can't afford the services of a competent diviner get to chip away at our services when we are thought of to do wrong. Oh well. It's been a rather gloomy day here, oppressively warm, and without the ability to conjure a simple spell. My hat is rather droopy from the humidity. I apologize if you can't see me very well, but what can you do, eh? They won't let me cast a simple spell that I could use to discard the discomfort of being overly saturated with the dew of the day. But so it goes. Other than that, not a great deal to talk about here. Of course, we have a new inmate. Interestingly enough, Javero the Necromancer was finally apprehended, and he has been put in here. Frightfully good chess opponent. Yeah, good mind on him. Not all necromancers are often given credit for being keen minds, but he's very good indeed. Fought him to a stalemate a few times. Quite good. And I didn't even cheat by seeing what moves he was going to make before he made them. And, yes. Diviner, I can do that. Yes. So that was certainly interesting. As far as the pecking order in our world, necromancers are not held in the same regard as the most powerful wizards that many would aspire to become, like the war wizards or the diviners or so on and so forth. Their lot is a bit harder, probably the most difficult among all of the mages. And many of them are driven mad by their powers. Javero is certainly an interesting character. He never was taught magic by spells, so his is a matter of being ridden by spirits. And unfortunately, a couple of them have kept bonds of him that are not very good company. When he is lucid and free of the spirits, as he is most of the time with the bonding wards that we wear, he is, probably could be a good member of society, I believe. I hope they rehabilitate him. But as long as those spirits reside around him that would attempt to ride him to the destruction of that which is about them, well, we'll hope for the best. Perhaps they may ask me to cast a little spell and figure out how to get rid of a couple of the spirits, but Wizard Jail. Another question that I was given recently by Lady Malice, lovely lady, an enchantress of no small power. I think she's lovely. It's kind of hard to tell, honestly. Enchantresses, but she she said that she had seen my little this, and she wanted to know why the wall behind me was set askew. It is tilted at an angle, and she asked if I was, of course, concerned that the wall was going to completely fall upon me, and gratefully I can say that Lady Malice has never served time in Wizard Jail. She does not know that all of the walls are set crookedly in Wizard Jail, so as to throw off spells that would attempt to transport the inmates out of the jail without passing through the walls, or to allow someone else to transport themselves magically within. Turns out that horizontal lines are very important for wizards who control positioning and placement, and by that engineering displacement throws off their abilities tremendously. It takes an incredibly powerful wizard, skilled in such arts, to be able to get by not having any landmarks that they can graft onto. The most set landmark around here that they could base off of is practically the horizon. So with all of these crooked lines going throughout the place, it can wear on the mind of a person who craves a particular order to things, but it seems to be very effective. I don't know of any wizard who's ever been broken out of Wizard Jail by just a simple spell to transport a body away. So that's, if anybody is curious, no, I'm not in danger. These walls have been here for hundreds of years. And again, for those of us who like things in a neat order, it's something that you have to let go of. But yes, there is a functional reason for it, and it is, well, it's to keep you a prisoner, really. And on to today's question. Today's question is from a bit of parchment I was handed. Although it is nice to be able to cast spells from time to time to summon up the questions, I always favor reading from a good bit of parchment or, well, properly old and dusty tome. But the question is, Dear Wizard, I am at work designing a few cities under the control of wizards. One is a floating steampunk city organized in a caste system of archmages, wizards, and the technicians who maintain and build the machines. Neat Jules Verne stuff. Okay. I am really stuck on how the wizards would grow food for sustaining themselves, since trade and shipping is slow even by airships. My question is, how do those wizards in their floating cities grow food? Keep up the good work. Signed, John of the County of Ferrara. An architect. Fascinating. I always enjoy talking to those who create through the sweat of their brow rather than magic. Get some good insights that way. But yes, John of Ferrara, I can answer this question. Firstly, though, much of it depends on the resources you have at hand. You are capable, apparently, of sending a city up in the air. You have enough wizards to have an entire caste system of archmagi who, well, let us be honest, it's kind of a pompous title. Usually only granted to a wizard after achieving some great feat or the accolades of their peers for whatever reason. Sometimes it's as political as it is any measurement of the strength of the wizard involved. I perhaps could be bothered to pursue such a title, but why? My deeds are well enough spoken for me, and I have my academy to run rather than pursuing a thesis on a new avenue of magic, so yeah. But Archmagi on the top, then your rank and file wizardry, which is, if you have enough wizards to have rank and file wizardry, then you're doing pretty well for yourself, and I suspect some of your resources are probably pretty broad. And then you have technicians, supposedly who are not themselves wizards, who create and maintain machinery that keeps the entire city afloat. Interesting. In almost any other circumstance, those same technicians would themselves be on the top, since it's their labor that determines whether or not ruin happens to the entire city. I strongly suspect that you have magical fail-safes that would keep the city aloft even if the machinery failed. Otherwise, your archmages are idiots. There, I said it. But either that or they have magical ways of whisking themselves away out of harm's way, but yes, I suspect that there is a nice safety net of magic there in case the steampunk doesn't quite work. And I am familiar with the terminology of steampunk, involving using machines powered by the forces of expanding water vapor, driving machines, which are usually large, chunky, ugly, smoke-belching creatures, every bit as noisy and destructive as a rampaging dragon in many cases. Well, even though I'm familiar with it, I can say that if you have enough magic, at least, that you have casts of wizards, might I suggest, first of all, integrating those wizards in with your technicians so that rather than rely on the burning of coals and you can incorporate magic into the creation of this steam. A little fire magic here, a little implied force there, and perhaps you can temper some of your steampunk. But I digress. You are interested in logistics, which is a measurement of getting the supplies that you need to where you need them. First of all, two parts: acquisition, creating the food, or procuring the food, and transport, to bring them to your city. In the first case, again, I'm not certain what the means that you have at your disposal are, but I suspect that if you have the resources to build a city that is designed to fly into the sky, you probably have a fairly good ground base, a nation which has the resources to build such a contraption. Therefore, that nation should be able, hopefully, to sustain a certain amount of food and other resources. If you have enough wizards that you have a cast of archmagi and wizards, perhaps their magics, depending on your realm, may dovetail into the production of such foods, much as my world does. There are very, very gifted magi who help to create food and the other goods which are needed for my world to maintain a certain level of comfort and survival, even. I suspect that if you, again, have access to those kind of resources, that a floating city seems to be a good thing to grasp at, I suggest employing those wizards to help your diviners to predict optimal weather and growing patterns. If you have any wizards who are talented with working with natural forces, enlarging your crops or renewing the soil so that you can plant several crops per season, by, gathering your resources the quicker, perhaps using the magic that you have. Also, I almost hesitate to say this because even though I am here in Wizard Jail, I don't know you, Master John. So, I don't also know the wizards that employ you. So, if they are of a particularly piratical bent, perhaps they have a floating city. Presumably few others exist. If they, say, hover above a city and tell them to give you half of their food, or you will drop the city upon them and squash them, perhaps that's an avenue of gathering resources as well. A little bit easier than growing them yourselves. That would be, I would highly recommend, be something of last resort. Otherwise, you're going to have opened yourself up to all kinds of reprisal. And while you may have a floating city, the desperate may have some designs against that city. And the results could be disastrous. So, I recommend employing your magic to help you to grow more crops. As far as transportation goes, you have a variety of options, of course. If you have airships, fairly good bet that you could create air barges. Using the same mechanics, but rather than make a proper ship that is enclosed, instead make a large flat deck with all of the mechanisms that you use to bear your city aloft, or whatever other craft that you employ. Make sure that when these travel, you don't need to worry about speed so much, but carrying capacity is key. Make sure that these are defended when you transport them for any great lengths. More practical would probably be to keep them docked and moored until your city is over the place which you are preparing to gather your resources, then dispatch the barges down. You can have your sky galleons and sky cutters and other martial airships to fly in support, or if you're fortunate enough to have creatures that are able to fly, or maybe perhaps to have riders, dragons, manticores, pegasi, hippogriffs, these are all commonly used to such an effort. And if you have powerful enough wizards, a wizard with a spell of greater flight may be able to also fly in support. Of course, employing a diviner to tell you when it is safe to do so, or where the threats may come from, is just intelligent if you have diviners under your employ. If you don't, get one. We're incredibly valuable. Perhaps the most powerful wizards that exist, truly. So, can't underestimate the value of a good diviner to your cause. Now, if that is the way that you can transport things, then that's the mechanism that you use. If you have wizards who call themselves Archmagi, however, I suspect that you may have even better access to transportation. Namely, in my world, we use teleportation circles. Anchors in reality, which allow you to tunnel through the distance between here and there without having to pass through the dull, empty space between. A simple spell, and whatever is on the teleportation circle is whisked to its mate, wherever that may be. If you have, for instance, a large granary and your city is in need of food, you pile the food onto the teleportation circle, your mage casts a spell, food is now in your city. Simple and easy. Now, I, again, don't know your circumstances, so if you do not have a base from which your city springs from, then things get a little bit more difficult, but the answers are going to be colored by the kinds of magic you have access to. For one thing, if you have mages of a bent towards life and nature, you may be able to create magical gardens. This is the more labor-intensive. It also has the side effect of taking up space, valuable space, in your city. If your city is truly vast, this may not be that much of an issue. And there are many side effects to having growing gardens within your city. Generally, it keeps the mood of the people up to have growing things about them. Certain beneficial creatures may be inclined to increase the population of your city with useful some supplies or services. The fairies and pixies and things can be drawn by a pleasant enough garden or growing space. And also, sometimes the proximity to the heavens may inspire different kinds of plant and herb growth that may be beneficial to magics and potion making, too. That's one avenue, certainly. Every branch of magic has a solution to this. For example, diviners can tell you where the best places to forage supplies and goods would be. They can direct the course for your city so that you can be economical in your transport and be able to pick up supplies easier. War mages, of course, will help you to defend against pirates, but they can also be used to, how can we say this, gather resources from unwilling donors, or piracy, or they can be used to gather tribute from grateful populations that they smite menaces and threats from. basically employing a mercenary bent to their skills, which is what I always felt their skills were best used for. Those who are gifted at changing the nature of things, transmuting them from one form to another, may be able to create food wholesale by transforming things that are of no use to something that is beneficial. We have magics, for instance, that can transform granite into something that is nutritionally very like bread. Doesn't taste very good, but it can keep you alive, and ultimately, if you're in dire straits, that's important. Also, I've seen a spell that can turn the stuff of clouds into a type of a very, very sweet, not very filling, but a fluff that you can eat. It does relatively little to satisfy your hunger, but it can keep you going for a time. Transmuters of your world may have other spells that may, for instance, grant more nutrition from food so that your people have to eat less of what you have. And other means of magically altering the foodstuffs or creating new foodstuffs for you. Of course, the necromancers can arrange it so that you don't have to eat anymore. That's not an option most people would choose. I would probably stay away from that personally. Even though I'm not as against necromancy as your average person, I prefer to keep it at arm's distance, or spell's distance if need be. As far as, mages who deal with transportation, well, again, useful for transporting foods and supplies to you from a distance. Those who are skilled in the elemental arts, controlling the raw forces of what is and what can be it fire, earth, air, or water, well, they can drastically help in creating, fertile circumstances so that you can grow crops yourself within your city. All you need is space. And as I said before, being able to take their talents and add them to the technicians who keep your city afloat may help you in so many more innumerable ways. Making the air beneath the city heavier so that the lift of the city is increased. Creating hotter fires so that the pressures are increased by your mechanisms that keep the place afloat. From elementalists I know, some of them are even able to add mixtures of the elements into other substances. For example, putting air into the stones to make them lighter. Changing the nature of them just by adding elemental admixtures to them. That may help your floating city design by itself. I would also perhaps say that if you're in a pinch, you can have your enchanters remove the gnawing hunger pains from your populace. That's something within their bounds. That would be in a pinch, though. It's good to know when your body needs food, so I wouldn't rely on that too heavily. Perhaps mostly on the lowest classes, but your archmagi will resist having their minds tampered with like that, so as I said, only in a measure of last resort. Of course, those enchanters may be able to talk other people into helping your city be replenished. That almost goes along with the piracy thing, though. So, also, your world may have access to something that, could also facilitate things. For example, if you have certain magical creatures that can alleviate your dependency on certain supplies. For example, in my world, we have a creature. It is rather infamous. It has long reaping talons, deadly sharp teeth, and it can regrow from injury almost as quickly as it sustains injury. It's quite a ferocious creature. It goes by various names. But one of our number crossed such a thing with a cow. And while they have sharp, nasty, pointy teeth, they are fairly domesticatable. I mean, they'll occasionally eat a stable hand, but nothing serious. And the thing is, you can put them to sleep, carve off a side of beef, and by the time it wakes up, it's healed, it doesn't know a thing has happened, and you've got steaks for 8. it's wonderful. Done tremendous things to take care of our reliance on huge herds. Perhaps something like that could be available in your world. Although, if you do make a great sum of money off of it, remember who told you. It's always nice to add to the stipend that the Academy sent me. But, who's your friend? Lord Cadrian, that's right. Also, employing herbalists and alchemists could be very beneficial. Alchemy in our world is considerably advanced. I don't know how it is in your world. But we have alchemists who have managed to create potables that are nearly imperishable. They come in a variety of flavors and can be stored as bricks that when water is added to them, they spring into, well, not a tasty-looking meal, but enough foodstuffs to satisfy the hunger and differing flavors so that you don't get sick of it after a couple of meals. Some of them taste fairly near to actual food. They can sustain the body for years at a time without having to have actual meat and vegetables and breadstuffs. Some of them are quite sweet and would be a decent dessert. But alchemists have their art has drastically helped out keeping our populations satisfied and tended to. Herbalists likewise. Remember what I said about wizards who value life and nature, and their talents lend towards that. Herbalists who use non-magical techniques can only help to amplify their effects. Lastly, I would say, waste not, want not. Do everything you can to take the side effects of the noisy, smoke-emitting machines that bear your city aloft, and try to think of ways that you can bend their activities, not just in levitation, but also for ways of sustaining. For instance, oftentimes a great deal of heat is generated. Well, if you're going to have hatcheries, for instance, or some sort of below-the-surface growing chambers, if you're going to create a dark, moist environment that is also warmed continuously at a regular temperature, you can get some excellent growth of various forms of fungi and other kinds of crops that don't require sunlight. And if you can control your elevation and still keep the comfort of the populace, rising above the clouds ensures that you always have plenty of sunlight for your crops. So by using those kind of methods, you can amplify the supplies that you already have and find numerous outlets that you can use to continue stacking supplies on supplies against the very real demands of a city and their populace. I hope that these suggestions find your ear and are fruitful. I think that you have an interesting dilemma ahead of you. Having clear thought ideas on how to surmount those kind of obstacles will head off disaster and will make it so that those who come to visit your realm find such things more plausible and can trust to the efficacy of flying cities as opposed to those that just stay on the ground and don't do anything. So, another question answered, my friends. My jailers nodded me that I have done my time, so I am Lord Cadrian de Flynn once more, here and Ask the Wizard, and I once again entreat you, if you enjoyed this, show your appreciation in some way. The one I appreciate the most is by asking me more questions. Give me more things to do to reduce my sentence. And if perhaps chance you found this sufficiently useful to not only yourself, but also you have in mind that it might help a friend, feel free to tell others about my little neck of the multiverse. I have no shortage of desire to help all of you out there with your various problems. Send them to me, and I will create a missive such as this. I have yet to have someone ask me a question where I did not answer it. That will continue. So I thank you very much, and I bid you good day. May the gods of magic smile upon you. Farewell.